Oh, hello there. I was just reading about one of history's greatest heroes, Mary Bowser. Now that you're here, why don't you sit down for a while and join me on this trip through American history? Espionage in the United States has always been around. The very first spies were employed during the Revolutionary War, and during the Civil War, it was a go-to tactic. During this time, the Union used their alliances with Southern slaves to gain vital information to defeat the Confederacy.
Well, espionage is used in wartime because of the old adage that information is power. And if you know how your opponent will be behaving or where they'll be at a certain time and date, that gives you a great ability to inflict a negative outcome or have things work out the way that you want them to. So espionage has historically always been a part of warfare, stories going all back to the Greeks.
Although many of these spies helped change history for the better, almost all of them have been forgotten. One such spy was named Mary Bowser. She rose from being a slave in the South to going on deadly espionage missions for the Union. The year is 1843 in Richmond, Virginia. Mary Bowser has just been freed from her lifelong slavery by her new mistress, Elizabeth Van Lew, to fulfill her abolitionist ideas. Elizabeth freed all of her father's former slaves. However, she saw potential in Mary. She was very intelligent for an uneducated woman, and had a photographic memory. Mary is heading to the Richmond train station. You see, Miss Van Lew had offered to sponsor Mary as she studied at the Quaker School for Negroes in Philadelphia.
And if a person had managed to learn to read and write, they had a larger opportunity to perhaps start a business or to find something commercial that would provide for their family.
After completing her education, Mary went on to wed Wilson Bowser and start a modest life. Tragically, only days after the Civil War began. A few years later, Mary got a letter requesting to meet her at the Van Lew residence. It felt strange after all this time to be back at her old master's house. However, she returned not as a slave, but as a strong, educated woman. Miss Van Lew saw this change in Mary, and asked her on that day if she would be a Union spy and go deep undercover as a slave in the Confederate White House. Mary was faced with a choice, one that would change everything. The options were clear: go back into slavery, a fate which she narrowly escaped, or live a peaceful life with her husband, however, always harboring the feeling that she was hiding from her destiny. She knew what she had to do.
Being a spy is not really looked upon as a great thing, right? Because there's the dishonesty involved, the sort of the dual nature of someone. Are you a good person? No, I'm a bad person. And so perhaps it's not something that we would brag about, because deception is the heart of espionage, and we don't normally look at that as an attribute.
The Van Lews had a connection with the First Lady of the Confederate White House, Varina Davis. Mary decided to re-enter a life of slavery under the code name Ellen Bond.
The South now was on its heels, because now they tried to resist saying it, but essentially now they were clearly defending the institution of slavery. Aside from the fact that Davis was pro-slavery, Davis was a person that was committed to the notion of states' rights. Okay, that's why it was called a Confederacy. And he thought that he could rally the people of the South to defend the cause. And of course, part of the great myth of the Civil War is that it became, that the South argues that it was a war to protect the Southern lifestyle, okay? And that they were honorable in their attempts to defend their way of life. And of course, that misses the whole reason that the war was fought, and it had to do with two different labor systems in one country, and the country would not be able to survive that way. Slavery was going to ruin the country.
Mary was installed as a house slave. She pretended to be illiterate, so White House visitors became accustomed to ignoring her as she cleaned around them. This way, She was able to access military documents, lists of troop movements, reports on moving Union prisoners, military strategies, and treasury reports. She relayed this information to Thomas McNiven, a local baker, who would then send her discovered information directly to General Grant via messenger. An example of her remarkable work was when she overheard a plan to relocate General Scott. Jefferson Davis instructed General Lee to move his forces to Rappahannock River in Virginia in order to surround a Union base. Mary relayed this information to Grant and prevented a massacre on the Union.
So one of the things that any U.S. history teacher is going to tell you about the Civil War is that the technology changed, but the tactics didn't. The South felt invaded, okay? They felt like their home was being attacked. And nothing is more motivating to people to rise up and defend and to fight against the outsiders than to have your home attacked, okay? So much of the fighting did take place in the South.
Mary had many different forms of communication with Thomas McNiven. One of them was using a secret code from letters in the Bible. Sometimes, when passing notes became risky, Mary would signal to the baker with different formations of a wrapped white cloth. Mary hung wet laundry outside the Confederate White House in a special coded pattern. A white shirt beside an upside-down pair of pants might mean General Hill moving troops to the west. Mary was terrified of being discovered by her superiors. If they found out she was committing espionage, she would lose her husband, her home, and her life. She knew that if she was discovered, she was at risk of being hanged. President Davis was getting suspicious. It seemed every time he discussed military secrets in his home, the Union somehow got wind of it. He suspected there was a spy among his staff.
I'm sure that in the course of the war, they may have discovered spies, at various places. But that high up, working right with the Confederate presidency, it would have been demoralizing. And if it turned out to be an African-American woman, of course, that would have destroyed parts of their arguments about how these people are inferior or they don't have good human qualities.
Her trusted ally, Thomas McNiven, was found guilty of espionage and brutally murdered. Mary knew staying there would be risky. After brief correspondence with Miss Van Loo, Mary left her life as Ellen Bond.
Here's someone who's incredibly brave, has taken on a task that she didn't have to take, okay, managed to be successful. And that type of courage and nobility to take a risk with your life for a cause you believe in really went against the way that the South saw black people in general.
Bowser's work as a Union spy during the Civil War was nothing less than courageous. Grant would later say to Bowser and Miss Van Loo, "You have sent me the most valuable information received from Richmond during the Civil War." She was additionally honored in 1995 by the U.S. government for her excellent work in the Civil War and was introduced into the Military Corps Hall of Fame. But Mary Bowser did much more to influence the future, as her work made her one of the earliest African American war heroes.